On Thursday, fast food workers took to the streets here in the Bay Area and across the country, demanding an increase in the minimum wage to $15 an hour. It was the latest action in a nationwide push, and it comes on the heels of a recent backlash against companies scheduling low-wage employees to work on Thanksgiving. The movement is gaining momentum. President Obama called for higher wages in a speech this week.
I'm going to keep pushing until we get a higher minimum wage for hard-working Americans across the entire country. It will be good for our economy. It will be good for our families.
But some economists argue raising the minimum wage could hurt the very people it's intended to help by killing jobs and pushing prices up. Joining me now to discuss this further are Ron Unz with the Higher Wages Alliance and Ken Jacobs with the UC Berkeley Labor Center. Before we dive into the discussion, though, let's first take a look at what it's like to live on less than $10 an hour through the eyes of one fast food worker.
My name is Guadalupe Salazar. I work at McDonald's for 18 months already. I work drive-through window doing cashiering, taking orders. I earn $8 per hour.
Guadalupe Salazar works a 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. shift at the McDonald's in Oakland's Eastmont Mall. She says she enjoys the job itself.
I love working at McDonald's. I love taking care of the customers.
But even after working close to 40 hours a week, Salazar says she's just scraping by.
I make $8 per hour. With all the deductions, it comes out to $532. 2-week pay period. $8 per hour is not enough. That's not enough even for one only person. Like me, I'm a single mom of a 6-year-old. I can afford to have my daughter with me full time like I wish. And I don't spend a lot of money because I try to save as much as possible just in case of something. So that I basically eat off the $1 menu.
Salazar says she saves up all year to take her daughter to the circus.
We always have our face painted, always, the same or something like that.
On Thursday, Salazar walked off the job along with other fast food workers around the country to highlight their plight.
We are striking. And we are striking because we want $15 per hour in the union.
Salazar says a pay hike would mean spending more money in the community and boosting the economy.
I will be able to have decent dinners on my table, not just a couple noodles. And basically, I will be able to provide for my daughter, which is very important for me. Having that kid happy. Not just, oh, mommy, can I have this? And I go, like, no, honey, you know I have no money. Oh, okay, mommy. When you have money, can I have it? Sure, honey, when I have money, you can have anything you want. So that will be what I will do.
So that's Guadalupe's statement. Ron, I want to begin with you. You're the author of a new ballot initiative to raise California's minimum wage to $12 an hour, lower than the $15 that Guadalupe and her fellow fast food workers are asking for. What did you think of her story?
I think it's a very realistic account of the day-to-day lives of so many of the low-wage workers in California, how they're struggling under very difficult positions, and they don't have the dollars to spend in our economy to revive us after this recession.
And Ken Jacobs, do you think that the minimum wage should be raised to $15 an hour, and what effects would that have?
Well, I think California does need a raise in the minimum wage, and in fact, we will have one now going up to $10 over the next several years. And what we're seeing is in urban areas, certain cities are also raising the wages higher than that. The city of SeaTac just passed one, doesn't cover everyone, but it'll be $15 an hour for the airport and for hotels near the airport, and the city of Seattle is looking for a much higher minimum wage. What we've seen from the research on minimum wages in general is overall it has a tremendous boost in people's earnings, and we see the evidence shows either no impact on employment or very small. Now we haven't seen a broad-based minimum wage increase to $15 an hour in the past, but I think these workers are calling for, in their industry, to have $15 an hour and a union, and it's a sensible demand.
Well, there are a number of studies, though, that will contradict what you're saying. I mean, for example, David Newmark, an economics professor at UC Irvine, he says that a $15 minimum wage would actually result in a roughly 5% reduction in employment. There's an economics professor at University of Massachusetts, Amherst, who says if we do this, $15 an hour, it could push up fast food prices by 20%, and hurting the very low-income families that a higher minimum wage is intended to help, because they often frequent fast food places because it's a lower type of meal, lower cost type of meal. What do you make of those studies that contradicts what you're saying?
If fast food workers' wages were raised to $15 an hour, that would be absorbed through a variety of ways. Part of that is higher prices, and you would have somewhat higher prices. Part of it would be absorbed through the savings from lower turnover, the cost of hiring new workers, training workers, unemployment insurance. And then some part of the cost could be absorbed through lower profits. And the key thing here would be in the fast food industry to reduce those franchise fees, because the fast food industry is incredibly profitable, $7 billion in profits in the last year.
Do you think they would actually do that, though? Lower their franchise fees?
The question here is going to be how much consumer pressure is there on the fast food industry to start addressing the issues of their workers.
And Ron, you think $12 an hour is more reasonable than $15 an hour. Why is that?
It seems to me, obviously at some point when you raise wages, the minimum wage too high, you really will get substantial loss of employment, which would be a problem. I think 12 is close enough to the existing level that you'd see minimal loss of jobs. And for example, if you take a company like Walmart that around the country has hundreds of thousands of low-wage workers, studies have shown that if you raise the Walmart wages to a minimum of $12, Walmart could absorb the costs by raising their prices 1% one time. It would cost the average consumer an extra $12, $13 a year, which I think most people could afford to pay, and it would put $4,000 or $5,000 or $6,000 a year or more in the pockets of those workers, and drive the sort of consumer demand that Walmart really needs to do well as a company.
These companies, and you did a study on this, talking about how a lot of low-income workers rely on public assistance, and that I think extends as well to low-income workers at big stores like Walmart. And these are the workers who get food stamps, get Medicaid, and rely on public assistance programs. Is it a form of corporate welfare?
Exactly.
What these companies are doing?
It's a classic case. A business obviously tries to privatize its benefits, the work of its workers, and socialize the costs, shift the burden as much as possible onto the backs of the taxpayers. If we had a $12 minimum wage in the United States, taxpayers around the country would save tens of billions of dollars, because businesses would then have to pay their own workers instead of forcing the taxpayers to give them earned income tax credits, food stamps, housing subsidies. We're really talking about forcing businesses to stand on their own 2 feet rather than receiving corporate welfare.
And Ken, the UC Berkeley Labor Center is the center that did that study.
That's right, and we found that over half, 52% of the families of fast food workers, as frontline fast food workers, rely on one or more public assistance programs to make ends meet, and that's true even for workers working 40 hours a week. We also find that only 13% have health care benefits through their jobs. So in order to get by, they need to rely on these public assistance programs.
I should point out that we did reach out to business groups and several more conservative scholars who are on the other side of this debate from where you stand, and none were available. However, the National Restaurant Association did send us this statement, and they're saying that the restaurant industry has been one of the few industries that continue to create jobs during the recession and the economic recovery. Dramatic increases in a starting wage, such as those called for in the rallies that we've seen around the country, will challenge that job growth history, increase prices for restaurant meals, and lead to fewer jobs created. What do you think?
The restaurant industry is growing quickly. The problem is not the number of jobs here in the restaurant industry, it's the quality of jobs. You potentially could see some effects on the margin, but the impact of those workers having more dollars in their pocket is really important. And I do want to clarify one thing. The fast food workers aren't calling for across-the-board $15 minimum wage throughout the United States. In some cities, they're looking at higher minimum wages, and we've seen that work in a city like San Francisco. And they're calling for a union and to have those wages in their industry. And the restaurant industry, or especially the fast food industry, is extremely profitable. They could do this, and the real question is between the organizing and the consumer pressure, and in some cases, public policy measures like a higher local minimum wage, can they get those wages up and make that difference?
And this week, President Obama weighed in. He's also calling for a higher minimum wage now. Do you think that will add to the kind of public pressure that you just mentioned? Will it make a difference in shifting the debate?
That's actually one reason I think an initiative is such a powerful vehicle in something like this. People have been talking about raising the minimum wage at the federal level for a couple of years now. Nothing's happened. It moves in Congress, it dies. Suddenly, we're talking about the voters of California deciding whether or not it makes sense for businesses to pay their own employees rather than for the taxpayers to subsidize them. And I think a $12 minimum wage will be very popular in California and put a lot of pressure on Congress to consider doing something similar on the federal level.
You know, this debate has been raging for years, the minimum wage debate. Ultimately, what do you think it will come down to, though, for a solution? Will it be more a matter of increased public pressure, consumer pressure, or do you have to go the legislative route through referendums, through initiatives, through local city council measures?
I think there's really a mix. We need a higher national minimum wage, and the Senate will be debating $10.10 an hour, and that makes sense as a floor nationally. We have even higher than that minimum wages being done in states, which also, given the economic difference between states, and in urban areas, cities like San Francisco, Seattle, San Jose, other places looking to either have or will raise the minimum wages there. And you also need stronger unions. And if we look at what's happened in terms of some of the decline in wages in this country, it goes hand in hand with the decline in the share of workers who are in unions. So that combination of organizing, consumer pressure, and policy makes the difference. And the interesting thing right now, seeing these organizations of fast food workers, the organizations of Walmart workers, who are really bringing the issue out in a way that we haven't seen, I think that's the right formula in terms of making change.
And Ron, you're a conservative. This is not normally a conservative cause. Why are you embracing this personally?
Well, I come from a scientific background. I look at issues on a case-by-case basis. Many times I think the conservative side is the right one. Sometimes I don't. But here, interestingly enough, once I've started going through some of these arguments with conservatives I know, including people who are very staunch conservatives, they really look at the issue in a new light. Because it's not a question of the workers not getting these extra dollars, but it's a question of who gives it to them. Is it the employer or is it the taxpayer? And I think it makes much more sense for the taxpayers not to have to subsidize all these private businesses through food stamps, through the earned income tax credit, and force these businesses to pay their own workers.
Do you agree? Obviously you do.
I think that's absolutely right. Where we're seeing, as I mentioned earlier, where we're seeing the growth in the economy is in these low-wage sectors. We've seen a decline in middle-class jobs in the country. We need to do something to raise the bottom, get more consumer demand back in the economy, deal with some of the issues of income inequality. To do that, we've got to raise the floor. And this combination of public policies like minimum wage laws, this kind of organizing we're seeing in consumer pressure, all can come together to begin to do that.
Okay, well, very interesting and much more debate to come in the new year, I'm sure, with congressional calls as well for a federal minimum wage hike. So I want to thank you both for being here, Ken Jacobs and Ron Unz. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.